Hello everyone, this is Whitney Will from Star Hearth Astrology, and I'm here today on the solstice at the beginning of Cancer season to welcome you into this space to talk about kind of what the qualitative time of this space might feel like, and to honor the solstice and to honor how far we've come since the winter solstice. So I'm going to be speaking about a few things. One is how the summer solstice is the full moon of the year. And I'm speaking about that metaphorically, not literally. So the full moon is not until next week. I'm going to talk about Cancer, and I'm going to do a little meditation and blessing. So thank you for being here, and may it serve you on your journey. So, what do I mean when I say that the summer solstice is the full moon of the year? Well, there is a way that we can look at the moon phases and map them onto the solar year. So the sun's journey around the zodiac and around the cosmos. And we can get some kind of rich, potent meaning-making tools from that. So the darkest time of the year, the winter solstice, the shortest day where we have the most darkness, we can correlate with the times that we have every month during the new moon. It's the darkest. Those are the darkest nights because the moon is together with the sun. And so we don't see the moon. It doesn't illuminate the night. The moon purifies itself every month during the new moon, kind of washes its body. It washes itself of the worldly things and purifies itself at the heart of the sun. And so we can also think about the sun in his journey through the sky, through the year, in the same way. So at the winter solstice, we have the darkest part, new things coming into the world. We don't know what they are because we're in the dark about them. Seeds being started deep underground with rumblings of what they will become. And what they will become comes from a source that is not your mind. It comes from the deep below. It comes from the soul, what the soul longs to become, which is not always good, which is not always smiled upon by consensual reality, which is not always productive, which is not always progressing along a linear path. Often the soul pulls us down. The soul wants us in our body. The soul wants us wrestling with Saturn and not transcending like the sun. So Jung called this force the unconscious, because we don't always know what it's doing, and it's not usually susceptible to us in our conscious minds deciding what we're going to force it into. It's responsive to the environment. It's responsive to some inner sense of life path. So as we move through the year, we come to the spring equinox, just to kind of keep this simple. And the spring equinox we can think of like the first quarter of the lunar month. So at that point, the moon becomes more than half full. She's growing. She becomes more than half illuminated. And the metaphorical resonance there is things are breaking the surface. So our little seed that has a whole story inside of itself that begins to wake up in the darkest place, the darkest time, is now tasked with breaking the surface and becoming something in the illuminated world. And there's often a crisis here. There is a crisis of strength. There's a crisis of In creativity, we realize we can't do everything, we can't be anything. So there's this real kind of pruning time. And so that pruning happens to kind of choose what will grow. And it can come from inside, it can come from outside, right? Our dialogue with the world, the dialogue of um, our souls and our animated body is in this constant exchange between inside and outside, and how to be a participant um, um, in such a way that those distinctions can kind of be dissolved, but in the earthly plane they're not dissolved. So we break the surface on the spring equinox and we still have all this waxing energy, and we're pushing forward and we're working on our projects, and we are exerting this energy. Part of what we're doing is making sure that, right, from the winter of our starvation, from the kind of purifying nature of fasting that happens in the winter, we are putting our energy in and sowing the seeds that are going to sustain us. And what happens at the summer solstice is we've put all the seeds in the ground. We have reached kind of the end of our energy of what we saved, and this waxing energy, pushing forward, creating, constructing, building, this very active masculine, pushing it against the world, on the world, in the world, penetrating energy, if you will. And then in the lunar cycle, we have the full moon, and the full moon really is that point. You've sown all the seeds. So in some ways, right, it's out of your hands. You're fully committed because you have put all of your energy into this thing. But, right, no amount of will can force that seed to germinate. No amount of your will forces the plants to grow, right? You can do whatever you can to, make sure they have the right fertilization, that they have the right conditions to support them in their growing. But there's nothing that you can do that will force them to grow. And so, right, suddenly it's not about your effort. It's about you relying on kind of the symphony of creation around you to participate with you and support you in your efforts. And so at the summer solstice, we come to that turning point, that pivot point of, okay, we have put as much as we can into taking things from the inspired darkness of the new moon into the corporeal embodied reality of the full moon, of the fully manifested in the physical realm. And there's a turning point. And that turning point comes from within. It comes from the call of your body. The call of your body that it needs food, it needs rest, it has just exerted all of this effort. We can't go any further. The call of, of your project to surrender to whichever way it's going to go. There's a process of letting go of the things that we create. And so what we find at the summer solstice, we kind of have, right, the solar project, whatever it is, the sun brings us the most light. The sun is at its maximum strength. And what we run into is the season of the moon. And what the moon calls us to do is be connected and remember. It calls us into a more receptive place. So the sun, right, is traditionally thought of as masculine and active. It wants to have its dream and see it done. The moon, as feminine and receptive, wants to be connected to the things around it, and its will and its desires are less active. Right, a lot of the will of the moon comes from the pull that she makes in response to her environment. And that pull is a receptivity, right? That pull is the cyclic regeneration. The sun wants to persist forever in this one way. And it's bound to the body and it's bound to the moon. And we've had religion for thousands of years kind of desecrate that side of the moon, and that, that we're embedded in our bodies, in our limited spaces with, you know, that we're limited by the physical world, by Saturn, by time, and that is somehow an oppression to the spirit, which is the sun. I think there's a tension, and we get the duality of the world and the opposing forces in this way. But each has stories and gifts um, and parts of experience that are really gifts to you. And illuminate. They're the luminaries. The moon is a luminary too. Illuminate your experience here in ways that can be very life affirming. So let's talk about Cancer. That was an introduction to the moon. It's funny moving into Cancer and finding I'm struggling with words, because the water signs in astrology are traditionally mute. They're not super verbal. And right when we try to force language into these less verbal spaces, what we get is an abstraction of them. I find it's very hard to feel and to say what you're feeling at the same time. There's a kind of movement back and forth that has to happen, right? Between the water signs and Mercury, right? Mercury is not, Mercury signs are Gemini and Virgo. Mercury struggles in Pisces, but is mute in the other signs as well. And that obviously means that, doesn't mean that you don't have words. It means that your imagination might not speak to you in language. It might mean that your daydreams are filled with music or emotional tones. Image is more powerful, intuition is more powerful. And Cancer is the sign of imagination. I think all of the water signs are quite imaginative. But Cancer, especially so in a childlike, whimsical way. I think imagination gets pretty exalted in Pisces, and can take a more morbid tone in Scorpio, which I have a lot of deep respect for. Don't mean that as a pejorative. And so why would Cancer be the sign of imagination? Well, Cancer is the sign of the mother-child dyad. Cancer is the sign of not being able to tell the difference between the mother and the child, right? And when you are pregnant, there's this weird feeling, right? Because your child grows out of you. And for a period of your pregnancy, your child is you, and then they are not you. And I think, right, even after they're born, they feel like they are you. And then eventually, right, they move away from you. And I think part of what our mothers give us, for better or worse, right, as a mother, when you're pregnant, you are imagining the life inside of you. And the imagination is so rich. And people talk about the dreams in pregnancy, which are so rich. And right there, we have to be held in the imagination of our mothers, in as much as, right, when we get older, and especially when we're teenagers and when we're in adolescence, we need to rebel from the dreams that our mother has had for us. It's very important that we are wrapped in her imagination like a womb, that starts building the story of our belonging for us. And obviously, these things can go horribly wrong. But it is important, right, that our mothers and that the village that we're born into imagines a place for us, because that is the root of belonging. Um, and it is always with us, and we have this longing inside of us to return to this union. Um, and yet, right, our task here, where it's not just the moon, it's not just the primordial goo of Cancer. We are asked to take form with Saturn. We are a body and a soul that also contains a spirit that wants to transcend, that wants to understand, that wants to turn things into symbols and make sense of them, right? We can see kind of the relentlessness of the sun as this kind of exhausting way that we can't fully embed ourselves in the matrix of existence and kind of turn off that, the Judeo-Christian tradition would call it that knowledge of good and evil, right? We can't ever return to the Garden of Eden, because the sun, this sense of will, this sense of force and individuality that exists inside of us, will always push our moon beyond that. Wants to be powerful and empowered and independent. But we begin in Cancer and belonging. Now, our ties to Cancer, and one of the things that the moon represents in Cancer is especially resonant with, is the idea of memory. And memory is connected to nostalgia, it's connected to regret, it's connected to grief. So I think that Cancer contains all of those things. And so there's this kind of, Cancer is sticky season. There's a stickiness to our emotions. There's a stickiness to our sense of the past, to what we have loved and what we have had to let go of, successfully or unsuccessfully. And how that kind of stitches our story together, and gives us a sense of our identity, right? Stories tell us where we are and who we are because of where we started from and what we have moved through. And the moon is your inner narrator and tells your story. She takes the things outside of you, the things that have happened to your experiences, and through your memory and through your body, turns them into things inside of you, turns them into you. Even literally takes your food and turns it into you. And so in Cancer, we have this this way in which we mix with other people. And we find belonging in the community. I think, right, Cancer is the natural response to Gemini. Gemini is going to create all of these ideas, discover all of these ideas, share them. Well, as soon as we start choosing which ones we identify with, we start sorting ourselves. We get, I think, the strength and the shadow of Cancer is tribalism. We gravitate towards people that we share things with. And that necessitates that we other people, right? That we say, you are in the group and you are out of the group. You are in the family, so I share my food with you. You are not in the family, so I don't share my food with you. I don't concern myself with your well-being. I don't nurture you. I don't do lunar things with you. Right? The moon is very personal. She's intimate. She has to do with our attachment styles. And so she's private and we don't share her with everyone. And that's Cancer. That's the sign of the moon. I think once we have that primary attachment, once we have that core sense of safety, right, then comes the sun. So then we have a strong enough vessel to support the power, to support individual identity. But individual identity rests upon the psychosomatic spiritual security of the moon, which is about attachment and connection. Otherwise, the sun has no grounding. Otherwise, the sun is irrelevant. Right? Once we don't want to be dissolved into the family, and so right when our identity starts being subsumed in that Cancerian goo, then the sun comes along in Leo to say, no, this is who I am. I want to discover my authentic self as separate from the imagination of my mother for the life that she imagined for me. I want to discover myself as my own being and perpetuate that and celebrate that in others. I want to figure out what is authentically me and what is my role and my task in this story. So that's what Cancer offers us, this complicated place of belonging and how we feel about that. And in 2021, the solstice is falling on Father's Day. And right, Cancer is most often thought of as the mother. Well, why did we place Father's Day where it often falls on the solstice? Besides the accidents of calendars, let's just think for a moment. Think about the nurturing of men. And so I personally am thinking about this today because both of my grandfathers passed away in the past year. So it's the first Father's Day of my life where they're both gone. And I had a baby last year. And so it's also my partner's first Father's Day as a father. And thinking about how men have protected and nurtured the soft places. And I talked about this in a past video, but the desire to be safe enough that you can allow yourself to be kind, and how in our patriarchal society, men most often can create safety or take it away, and we give them that power. Different kinds of safety. Right? And so I just want to take a moment and honor those men that create places that are soft enough, that are safe enough to be soft. And I want to honor the father inside of us, the Capricorn inside of us that holds the structure so that the Cancerian liquid can fill the vessel and nourish us. We need both, right? If we have no container, the water has no form. If we don't have any water, the container doesn't nurture us either. So let's take a moment, and if you're comfortable, close your eyes, and we're just going to do a little solstice meditation, balancing the light, thanking the waxing cycle of the year, and welcoming in the waning half of the year, where our task is gathering rather than seeding. We come to the solstice, the brightest space where the song of light has found its strongest voice, where we see farthest and longest illuminated by the bright idealism of the sun. And standing as we are at this vista, we remember home. We remember the home that we emerged out of into this life. We remember homes of the past. We are called not to the task of the hero, not to transcending the world, but to nurturing it and containing it as participants for each other. We are the weft. We are the woven strands that create the fabric of community and reality. We are the living stories that are creating the structures that we will pass down to others. We are, all of us, acquainted with the wounding of being a person. We are all of us honoring of the power of moving beyond, the power and pleasure of creating in the world, whether it be a family, a meal, a space, a book, a friendship, a garden. And in this time, we've been dedicating our efforts to discovering what this time offers us, what the story of 2021 will look like in our memories, in our diaries, in our relationships. And we are ready to turn the corner, to enter the season of the moon, and to gather what we have sown, to tend our projects with wholeheartedness, and to wait patiently for the harvest to come in, to receive it with gratitude, to store it safely and out of respect, to digest it for the good of ourselves and the good of the world. We also honor what we have lost, be it people or dreams or projects that have fallen along the way. We honor the love that we gave them and the love that we still have for them. We honor the complicated questions that can never be answered about life, about why, about meaning. And we honor ourselves in the striving and the asking of those questions and those answers. The world offers us places of belonging, and yet when we feel unworthy, when we have received stories of our unworthiness, we have difficulty accepting that space of belonging. What you crave, what you desire, longs for you. The imagination of your mother in her purest form was that you feel empowered in your life and safe in your belonging, that you receive the things of the world with gratitude, and that you move through the world in a dance of giving and receiving, of action, of dormancy, of rest, and that each of your days offers you a new reflection and a deeper path into the story of your life and the transformation of yourself. Thank you for being here today on the solstice. I have so much hope and belief and desire for you to be met with tenderness in the world and in yourself. I hope this is helpful along your journey. Be well.